The smoky air inside Station Omega-7's mercenary bar was thick with tension and cheap alien alcohol. Creatures from dozens of different worlds sat hunched over glowing tables, their eyes scanning holographic contract displays that promised fortune to those brave enough or stupid enough to take them on. In the corner booth, a group of human security guards spoke quietly among themselves. Their conversation drifted through the cantina in fragments, names like Jiho, Minho, and Tai Yang mentioned, with the kind of respect usually reserved for legends. The aliens nearby pretended not to listen, but their pointed ears and sensor stalks twitched with interest whenever these particular names came up. Krixtal had been doing this job for 30 years. His reptilian skin bore the scars of countless battles across the galaxy, and his collection of 53 completed contracts made him one of the most respected mercenaries in known space. He'd fought against machine armies, hunted down rogue AI systems, and even survived a direct confrontation with a void leviathan. Nothing in the galaxy particularly scared him anymore. That's why he stopped walking when he saw the new contract posting. The holographic display was brighter than usual, designed to catch attention. But it wasn't the flashy presentation that made Krixtal's blood run cold. It was the number at the bottom. The payout was astronomical, more credits than most mercenaries saw in their entire careers. Enough money to buy weapons that could level cities, or purchase entire star systems, or retire to a paradise world and never work again, for killing just 3 humans. The target information was straightforward enough. Human Special Forces Unit. Call sign Iron Tigers. 3 soldiers stationed on a remote mining colony called Kepler 442b, way out on the edge of civilized space. The job description was simple. Eliminate all targets, no survivors. Payment on confirmation of death. On paper, it looked like the easiest money anyone could ever make. Vexnol was young, barely old enough to legally carry weapons in most systems. His blue-scaled skin still held the brightness of youth, unmarked by the battle scars that decorated older warriors. He'd only completed a handful of contracts, mostly simple bodyguard work and cargo protection runs. But he was hungry for respect, desperate to prove himself among the veteran mercenaries who barely acknowledged his existence. When he saw that payout number, his eyes went wide with greed and ambition. "Easy money," he whispered, reaching out toward the contract terminal with trembling fingers. In his mind, he was already spending those credits, imagining the reputation he'd earned by completing such a high-value contract while the veterans stood around doing nothing. Krixtal's hand moved faster than a striking snake, his scaled fingers wrapping around Vexenol's wrist before the young warrior could touch the screen. "Don't," the veteran said quietly. Vexenol tried to pull away, frustration clear in his voice. "But the payout is incredible. Look at those numbers. This could set me up for life." "It's a death sentence," Krixtal replied, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom and painful experience. Around the cantina, other veteran mercenaries had noticed the exchange. Without saying a word, they began to move away from the contract board. These were warriors who had survived decades in the most dangerous profession in the galaxy, fighters who had learned to trust their instincts above all else. When they saw that particular posting, some ancient survival instinct kicked in, screaming warnings that their rational minds couldn't quite explain. One by one, they turned their backs on what appeared to be the easiest money in the galaxy and walked away. Their faces were grim, their expressions haunted by memories they didn't want to share with the younger generation. The contract remained untouched on the board, its bright display seeming almost sinister in the dim lighting of the cantina. Other young mercenaries approached it throughout the evening, drawn by the incredible payout like moths to a flame. But each time, veteran warriors stepped in with quiet warnings, shaken heads, and stories told in whispers too low for most to hear. As the night wore on, the untouched contract seemed to glow more ominously, casting strange shadows across the faces of those who dared to look at it. The name Iron Tigers hung in the air like a curse, and the simple human names mentioned in hushed conversations began to take on the weight of legends. Something about those 3 soldiers on that distant mining colony had put fear into the hearts of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors, and that fear was spreading through the cantina like a virus, infecting everyone who came close to understanding the truth. 3 sleepless nights passed before Vexnol's wounded pride finally overcame his common sense. The young Zephyrian warrior couldn't stop thinking about that massive payout, and the dismissive looks from the veteran mercenaries burned in his memory like acid. He'd worked too hard to build his reputation just to let some old-timers scare him away from the biggest score of his lifetime. When he returned to the contract board, he didn't come alone. Word had spread through the mercenary underground about the unclaimed human contract, and Vexenol had managed to assemble what he considered the perfect team. Each member was a specialist in their field, handpicked from different corners of the galaxy to create an unstoppable killing machine. "Look at this payout," Vexnol told his assembled squad, gesturing toward the glowing contract display. "We're talking about enough credits to buy our own fleet, and for what, 3 humans sitting on a rock in the middle of nowhere?" Rexmore stepped forward first. The Keth assassin was a living shadow. His species evolved for perfect stealth and silent killing. His black skin seemed to absorb light, and his movements were so fluid they looked almost liquid. He'd eliminated over 100 high-value targets across 17 different star systems, including several that were supposed to be impossible to reach. If anyone could get close to the humans undetected, it was him. The twin draconian berserkers, Thax and Vax, were next to join. These massive humanoids stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in natural armor plating that could deflect most energy weapons. Their species was bred for war, genetically engineered to feel no fear and to fight until their last breath. They'd single-handedly destroyed entire military installations, tearing through defensive lines like paper. When they fought together, their coordination was flawless, as if they shared a single mind. Quindar represented the cutting edge of military technology. The Nexus operative had replaced most of his organic body with advanced cybernetic systems that enhanced his speed, strength, and tactical awareness far beyond natural limits. His neural implants could hack into almost any computer system, while his weapon systems could adapt to any threat in real time. He was essentially a walking weapons platform disguised as a person. Finally, there was Zixtha, the ethereal psychic. Her species existed partially outside normal space-time, giving them abilities that most other races couldn't even comprehend. She could read minds, manipulate emotions, and even phase through solid matter when necessary. Her presence on the team meant that no secret would remain hidden, no ambush would go undetected. Together they represented everything that made mercenary work profitable in the modern galaxy. Stealth, brute force, technology, and supernatural abilities all combined into a single, coordinated unit. "The humans can't possibly be that dangerous," Vexnol continued, his confidence growing as he looked at his assembled team. "Think about it logically. They're primitive bipeds who only discovered faster-than-light travel about a century ago. Most species in this galaxy have been spacefaring for thousands of years. What could 3 of them possibly do against specialists like us?" The team nodded in agreement. From their perspective, it made perfect sense. Humans were newcomers to galactic civilization, barely past their technological infancy. They didn't have the natural advantages of other species. No armor plating like the Draconians, no psychic abilities like the Ethereals, no advanced evolution like the Keth. They were just soft, pink creatures with basic tools and simple tactics. Vexenol pulled up the intelligence files he'd managed to gather about their targets. The information was surprisingly limited, but what little existed seemed to confirm his assumptions about human weakness. Sergeant Jiho Kim, team leader. Corporal Minho Park, explosive specialist. Private Taiyang Li, communications and electronics. He read aloud. "Standard military structure, nothing special. They've been stationed on Kepler 442b for about 6 months, running security for a small mining operation. No significant combat experience listed in their files. The names meant absolutely nothing to any of the alien mercenaries. They were just random sounds, human designations with no particular significance. Jiho, Minho, Taiyang. They might as well have been equipment serial numbers for all the impression they made. But those names would soon become burned into their memories with the intensity of a branding iron, spoken in whispers throughout the mercenary community as examples of why some contracts should never be accepted. no matter how much they paid. The team accepted the contract with confidence, already planning how they would spend their enormous payout. They began immediate preparations for what they assumed would be a simple elimination mission against 3 unremarkable human soldiers on a distant mining colony. None of them realized they were about to learn why veteran mercenaries walked away from human contracts, or why those simple Korean names were spoken with such fearful respect in the dark corners of Station Omega-7. The approach to Kepler 442b had gone exactly according to plan. Vexnol's team used the planet's unusual 6-hour night cycle to their advantage, timing their arrival so they could move under cover of complete darkness. Their ship's stealth systems were top of the line, military hardware designed to fool even the most advanced sensor arrays. As they descended through the atmosphere, every piece of equipment functioned perfectly. The mining facility spread out below them like a collection of simple metal boxes connected by covered walkways. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a basic industrial operation designed to extract valuable minerals from the planet's crust. Nothing fancy, nothing threatening, just the kind of boring corporate outpost that existed on thousands of worlds throughout the galaxy. Vexnol felt his confidence surge as they landed their ship in a rocky canyon about 5 kilometers from the facility. Everything was going smoothly. The humans had no idea they were coming. "Thermal scans are clean," Quindar reported, his cybernetic eyes glowing softly in the darkness as he analyzed the facility through multiple spectrums. "I'm picking up 3 heat signatures in the main habitat block. Standard human body temperature. Normal breathing patterns. They appear to be sleeping." The team moved out in perfect formation, their coordination the result of dozens of missions together. Raxamore activated his cloaking field and became a barely visible shimmer in the night. Sersharezi took point position. The technology was borrowed from ancient Keth hunting techniques, refined over millennia, and enhanced with modern energy systems. He was essentially invisible to any detection method the humans could possibly possess. Thax and Vax split off to flank the main building, their massive forms moving with surprising grace despite their size. Years of combat experience had taught them how to use the terrain to their advantage, staying low and keeping to the shadows cast by the facility's structures. Their natural armor would protect them from most weapons, but there was no point in taking unnecessary risks. Zixtha hovered slightly above the ground, her psychic abilities scanning the area for any sign of conscious thought or hidden defenders. Her ethereal senses could detect mental activity from great distances, and she found nothing more than the slow, peaceful brainwaves of sleeping humans. The facility was completely undefended. Quindar moved with mechanical precision, his enhanced senses cataloging every detail of the environment. His cybernetic implants were running constant analysis on the facility's power grid, communication systems, and structural weaknesses. Within minutes, he had identified 17 different ways they could eliminate their targets without leaving any evidence behind. They had executed missions like this hundreds of times before on dozens of different worlds. The routine was so familiar it had become almost boring. Approach under stealth, identify targets, eliminate quickly and quietly, collect payment, and move on to the next contract. Human security was notoriously weak compared to other species, and 3 soldiers in an isolated facility should have been the easiest job they'd ever taken. That's when everything went wrong. Jiho's voice came through their encrypted communication channel as clearly as if he was standing right next to them. The sound was so unexpected that Vexenol actually jumped, his weapon automatically swinging toward the source of the transmission before he realized it was coming through his own equipment. "Good evening, gentlemen," the human said, his tone conversational and completely relaxed. "Welcome to Kepler 442b. I'm Sergeant Kim, and I'll be your host for this evening's festivities." The mercenary team froze in place, their minds struggling to process what was happening. Their communication system used military-grade encryption that was supposed to be absolutely impossible to break. The frequency-hopping algorithms changed thousands of times per second, and the quantum encryption keys were generated by their ship's computer core. No human technology should have been capable of even detecting their transmissions, let alone decoding them. "Before we begin tonight's entertainment," Jiho continued pleasantly, I should probably mention that my colleague Minho has been counting motion sensors as you approached our little facility. Final tally came to 18 separate detection points, which is actually quite impressive, given the quality of your stealth equipment. Quindar's cybernetic systems immediately began scanning for the sensors the human mentioned, but his enhanced vision couldn't detect anything that looked like surveillance equipment. The facility appeared to have only basic security systems, nothing that should have been capable of tracking their movements. Oh, and Taiyang wanted me to let you know that he's been monitoring your ship since you entered our star system about 3 hours ago, the sergeant added as if discussing the weather. Really impressive stealth technology, by the way. Took him almost 30 minutes to figure out how to track you properly. The blood in Vexnol's veins turned to ice water. Their ship's stealth systems were beyond anything humans should have been able to detect, let alone track. The technology was centuries ahead of human development. One more thing, Quindar, Jiho said, and the cybernetic operative felt his enhanced heart skip a beat at hearing his name. Your implants are broadcasting on a frequency we cracked about 6 months ago. You might want to get that looked at when you get home. Before any of them could respond, the night sky lit up with a brilliant orange glow from the direction of their landing site. The explosion was visible even from several kilometers away, a pillar of fire that climbed into the darkness like an angry finger pointing at the stars. Their ship, their only way off the planet, had just been destroyed, while Vexnol and his team stood frozen in shock, staring at the burning wreckage of their escape route. Similar moments of terrible realization were echoing through the memories of mercenaries scattered across the galaxy. In cantinas, safe houses, and mercenary halls on 1,000 different worlds, veteran fighters carried scars that went far deeper than anything left by conventional weapons. The story everyone whispered about was the siege of Proxima Station. What should have been a simple assault had turned into 8 days of absolute nightmare for the Gordanian shock troops involved. 3 human special forces operators had been stationed there as routine security, nothing more than a token presence, to satisfy some bureaucratic requirement. When a full regiment of Gordanians attacked, everyone expected the humans to surrender or die within hours. Instead, something impossible happened. The humans turned the station itself into a weapon. Air recycling systems became poison gas dispensers. Artificial gravity fields became crushing traps. The computer network that controlled everything from lighting to waste disposal became a hunting ground where the humans stalked their enemies like ghosts in the machine. Elevators became death traps, corridors became mazes, and even the cafeteria's food dispensers somehow became part of an elaborate psychological warfare campaign. By the 3rd day, the Gordanian soldiers were shooting at shadows and fighting each other over imagined betrayals. By the 5th day, they were begging for reinforcements. By the 8th day, the survivors were found huddled in escape pods, too traumatized to explain what had happened to them. 3 humans had defeated an entire regiment without ever engaging, in a single direct firefight. Then there was the Kepler incident, which had become required reading in intelligence academies throughout known space. The pirate fleet Crimson Nebula had been one of the most feared criminal organizations in the Outer Rim, led by 7 captains who had terrorized shipping lanes for decades. They were smart, ruthless, and completely loyal to each other, until a single human operative infiltrated their ranks. Nobody knew exactly how the human had done it. Some said he posed as a captured merchant. Others claimed he had been smuggled aboard in a cargo container. A few insisted he had somehow hacked his way into their computer systems from light years away. What everyone agreed on was the result. Within 6 weeks, the 7 captains had turned on each other in a bloody civil war that destroyed the entire fleet. The human had never fired a weapon, never killed anyone directly, never even revealed his true identity. He had simply fed each captain carefully crafted information that made them suspicious of the others. A financial record here, a communication intercept there, a few altered documents that suggested betrayal and conspiracy. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late to stop the chain reaction. The fleet had literally destroyed itself while the human operative watched from the sidelines. But the story that really kept mercenaries awake at night was the legend of the Ghost of Titan. This particular human had somehow acquired contracts to eliminate entire mercenary companies not individual targets, but whole organizations. The scary part wasn't that he succeeded, but how he did it. Each company had received anonymous messages containing detailed psychological profiles of every member, along with carefully designed scenarios that would pit them against each other. One company turned violent over a rigged card game. Another destroyed itself in a dispute over contract payments that had been artificially manufactured. A third simply vanished after its members became convinced that some of their colleagues were working for enemy governments. In every case, the mercenaries had eliminated themselves through internal conflicts, while the ghost of Titan remained completely invisible. The only evidence of his involvement was cryptic messages left behind, signed with simple Korean names like Hyun, Woo, or Seung, names that had become almost mythical in mercenary circles. These stories spread through the galactic underworld, like a virus, growing more terrifying with each retelling. But they all shared common elements that made them impossible to dismiss as mere propaganda. The humans involved never seemed to rely on superior firepower or advanced technology. Instead, they used their enemy's own strengths against them, turning every advantage into a weakness through some kind of tactical alchemy that nobody else could understand. The human military had a saying that had become famous throughout the galaxy's criminal organizations: "We don't just fight wars, we turn everything into a classroom." At first, most aliens had laughed at this motto, assuming it was typical human arrogance. But as more and more mercenary companies encountered human special forces, the true meaning became terrifyingly clear. Humans didn't just adapt to their enemies' tactics. They evolved during combat, learning and improving in real time. Every weapon used against them became data for developing countermeasures. Every strategy employed by their opponents became a lesson in how to defeat similar tactics in the future. Every battle made them not just individually stronger, but improved the capabilities of their entire species. This was why veteran mercenaries walked away from human contracts. Not because humans were unbeatable, but because fighting them only made them more dangerous for the next group that tried. Every mercenary company that had accepted contracts against human special forces had learned the same terrible lesson. Humans didn't just win battles, they transformed every conflict into an educational opportunity that benefited their entire military structure. The galaxy was full of species that had mastered warfare through superior technology, natural advantages, or ancient wisdom. But humans had mastered something far more dangerous. They had learned how to learn from war itself. As the hours crawled by in the alien darkness of Kepler 442b, Vexenol's elite team began to understand that they were fighting something far worse than enemy soldiers. They were trapped in a psychological nightmare that seemed to know their deepest fears and most carefully guarded secrets. It started with their communication equipment turning against them. The secure channels they used to coordinate their movements suddenly began broadcasting conversations that should never have existed. Quindar nearly dropped his weapon when he heard his own voice coming through his earpiece, discussing his childhood trauma with void wraiths, terrifying energy beings that had destroyed his home colony when he was young. The recording was perfect, down to the slight tremor in his voice when he described watching his family disappear into nothingness. The problem was, he had never told anyone about that fear. The conversation playing through his comm system had never happened. Zixtha's psychic abilities, which had always been her greatest strength, suddenly became a source of terror. Images began flooding her mind, her peaceful homeworld burning under alien attack, her people screaming as their crystalline cities shattered like glass. The visions were so vivid and realistic that she could smell the smoke and feel the heat of the flames against her ethereal skin. But these weren't memories or prophecies. They were artificial constructs being somehow forced directly into her consciousness, bypassing every mental defense she had spent decades learning to build. The mining facility's public address system became a source of constant psychological torment, crackling to life at random intervals, with updates that seemed impossible for the humans to know. "Minho here," came the cheerful voice over the speakers, as if the human was commenting on sports scores rather than conducting warfare. "Just thought you'd like to know, Vexenol, that your mother on Zephyr Prime received the insurance payout for your death about an hour ago. The notification went through automatically when your ship exploded. Fry may have jumped the gun on that paperwork, but hey, at least she'll be financially comfortable while she grieves. Vexenol felt his stomach drop. His insurance policy was a closely guarded secret, known only to his immediate family and the banking institution that managed it. The humans had somehow accessed private financial records across interstellar distances and manipulated them in real time. His mother would be receiving official notification that her son was dead, probably at this very moment. The announcements continued throughout the night, each one more unsettling than the last. Tai Yang checking in, another voice reported conversationally. Haraxmore, just a heads up. Your contract with the Shadow Guild expires in 3 days. Might want to think about renegotiation terms, assuming you're still alive to discuss them, of course. Also, they've been asking questions about that job you botched on Terminus Station. Apparently, there were supposed to be no witnesses, but someone's been talking. Raxmore's cloaking field flickered as his concentration wavered. The Shadow Guild contract was known only to himself and the organization's leadership. More terrifying was the reference to Terminus Station, a mission he had thought was completely successful until now. If the Guild knew about witnesses, his reputation and quite possibly his life were in serious danger. But the psychological warfare went far beyond simple intelligence gathering. The humans seemed to be studying their every move, learning their behavioral patterns and tactical preferences in real time, then using that information to drive them toward emotional breakdown. Thax, the massive draconian berserker, found his greatest strength turned into a liability. Every time his species' famous battle rage began to build, some perfectly timed environmental hazard would intervene. Gas leaks would ignite just as he charged forward, creating walls of flame that forced him to retreat. Floor panels would give way at precisely the right moment to send him tumbling into maintenance shafts. Overhead, pipes would burst and flood. Corridors with scalding steam exactly when he was building momentum for an attack. It wasn't random. The timing was too perfect. The coincidences too convenient. Somehow the humans were predicting his movements and manipulating the facility's industrial systems to counter his attacks before he even made them. Vax, the other twin, experienced something even more disturbing. His brother's movements, normally synchronized with his own through instinctive battlefield coordination, began to feel wrong. Small delays in communication, slight hesitations in movement, tiny variations in timing that threw off their usually flawless teamwork. It took him several hours to realize that the humans were somehow interfering with the quantum entanglement effect that allowed draconian twins to coordinate in battle. They were being dissected psychologically, their fears exploited, their strengths neutralized, and their teamwork systematically dismantled. The humans weren't just fighting them. They were conducting some kind of real-time behavioral analysis, learning everything about their opponent's capabilities and weaknesses through direct observation. Every tactical decision the Mercenaries made was being catalogued and studied. Every emotional response was being measured and analyzed. Every fear and insecurity was being identified and weaponized against them. The most terrifying realization was that the humans were treating this entire encounter not as a life-or-death battle, but as a learning opportunity. They were studying alien psychology and combat doctrine through live experimentation, using Vexenol's team as unwilling test subjects in some kind of twisted educational exercise. The Mercenaries had come to Kepler 442b, expecting to hunt 3 sleeping humans. Instead, they had become specimens in a laboratory, trapped in a nightmare where their own minds had become weapons pointed at themselves. Dawn broke over Kepler 442b with blood-red light filtering through the planet's thin atmosphere, but the mercenary team barely noticed the sunrise. They had spent the entire night moving through what they thought was a simple mining facility, only to discover that they were actually navigating a carefully designed maze where every step was being monitored, analyzed, and turned against them. Hunters had become the hunted, and they were losing badly. Raxmore was the first to fall, and his disappearance sent shockwaves through the remaining team members. The Keth assassin had been moving through a maintenance corridor, his cloaking, field active and his movements silent as death itself. He had successfully infiltrated hundreds of facilities across the galaxy using these same techniques, and his stealth technology had never failed him before. Then, without warning, his cloaking device simply stopped working. One moment he was invisible, a living shadow moving through the facility's darkened passages. The next moment, he was standing fully visible in the middle of a brightly lit corridor, his black skin and lethal weapons exposed for all to see. Before he could react, the facility's automated safety systems kicked in, apparently detecting him as some kind of malfunction or contamination. Emergency blast doors slammed shut on both ends of the corridor, trapping him in a sealed section. Then, with mechanical precision, the automated systems began treating him as a hazardous material that needed to be contained. Robotic arms emerged from hidden panels in the walls, grabbing him with the same efficiency they would use to handle toxic waste or damaged equipment. Within seconds, Raxmore found himself sealed inside a maintenance pod designed for storing dangerous materials, completely helpless and unable to communicate with his team. The facility's computer system had classified him as a malfunction that needed to be isolated, and no amount of struggling could convince the mechanical systems otherwise. The twins, Thax and Vax, lasted slightly longer, but their fate was just as carefully orchestrated. What appeared to be a series of unfortunate accidents began separating them from each other and from the rest of the team. A tunnel collapsed just as Thax was moving through it, cutting off his access to the main facility. A malfunctioning airlock trapped Vax in a sealed chamber, while the atmospheric systems ran a decontamination cycle that would last several hours. Each separation looked completely natural, like the kind of industrial accidents that happened in mining facilities throughout the galaxy. But the timing was too perfect, the coincidences too convenient. Someone was manipulating the facility's systems to isolate the team members one by one. When the twins tried to regroup using their backup communication systems, they found themselves walking into elaborate traps that used their own weapons against them. Motion sensors they had placed for security became triggers for industrial accidents. Explosive charges they had set as backup plans were somehow redirected to create cave-ins that blocked their escape routes rather than clearing paths forward. Vexnol watched it all happening through hacked security feeds, his confidence crumbling, as he realized the true scope of what they were facing. On one screen he could see Jiho calmly disarming one of their quantum mines using what looked like a standard mining scanner. The human moved with casual confidence, as if diffusing military-grade explosives was no more challenging than repairing a broken piece of equipment. "This is impossible," Vexnol muttered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "They're using industrial equipment like it was specifically designed for combat operations." Zixtha floated beside him, her ethereal form shimmering with psychic distress. As her abilities finally began to penetrate the human's intentions, what she found there terrified her more than any physical threat could have. "Because to them everything is a weapon," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and horror. "They don't see a mining facility when they look around this place. They see a fortress with defensive positions and strategic advantages. They don't see maintenance tunnels and service corridors. They see tactical pathways and ambush points." Her psychic senses were picking up the terrifying truth about human battlefield awareness. Every piece of equipment in the facility, every environmental system, every structural weakness and engineering quirk had been catalogued and repurposed for military applications. The humans had transformed an ordinary industrial operation into a sophisticated weapons platform, using nothing more than their ability to see potential where other species saw only function. "Every ventilation shaft has become a sniper position," Zixtha continued, her mental abilities mapping the facility through the human's eyes. "Every power conduit is a delivery system for electromagnetic warfare. Every automated system has been reprogrammed to serve multiple purposes. They've turned the entire facility into an extension of themselves." Quindar discovered this truth the hard way as his cybernetic enhancements began failing one by one. Systems that had been functioning perfectly for years suddenly shut down without warning. His enhanced vision flickered and died. His neural interface connections went silent. His weapon targeting systems became useless. Each failure was caused by precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses that should have been impossible to generate with mining equipment. But the humans had apparently figured out how to turn simple ore scanners and geological survey tools into sophisticated electronic warfare devices. They were using equipment designed to find metal deposits in rock, to instead locate and disable cybernetic implants in living beings. The facility around them had become a living weapon, and the humans were its nervous system, controlling every aspect of the environment with the kind of tactical awareness that most species would need decades to develop. They weren't just fighting in the facility. They had become the facility, turning every system and every tool into an extension of their own capabilities. The mercenaries were no longer hunting 3 human soldiers. They were trapped inside a mechanical predator that was slowly, methodically, picking them apart piece by piece. The sun was setting on Kepler 442b's second day when Vexnol realized he had only one option left. His elite team had been systematically dismantled. His carefully planned operation had become a nightmare, and his reputation as a mercenary was already destroyed. But he still had weapons. He still had Zixtha fighting beside him, and he still had enough firepower to level half the facility. If the humans wanted to play games with industrial equipment and psychological warfare, fine. But they couldn't possibly survive a direct assault from military-grade plasma weapons designed to punch through starship armor. "We're ending this now," Vexnol told Zixtha as he checked his remaining arsenal. "No more sneaking around, no more playing their games. We hit them with everything we have left all at once until there's nothing but ash where there used to be." The ethereal psychic nodded weakly, her form flickering as she struggled to maintain coherence after hours of mental assault. "Direct confrontation might be our only chance. Their psychological defenses are too strong for subtle approaches." They made their way to the facility's main mining chamber, a massive cavern carved from the planet's bedrock where industrial extractors had been pulling precious metals from the walls for months. It was the largest open space in the facility, with multiple levels of catwalks and processing equipment that would give Vexnol clear fields of fire in every direction. He set up his heaviest weapons on a raised platform overlooking the chamber, positioning plasma cannons and particle beam projectors that could reduce armored vehicles to vapor in seconds. These weren't the kind of weapons you used for assassination or stealth operations. They were tools of war, designed to eliminate entire squads of enemy soldiers in open combat. "Come out and face us," Vexnol shouted into the echoing chamber, his voice amplified by the facility's acoustic properties. "Enough hiding behind your tricks and your machines. Let's settle this like real warriors." For a moment, silence filled the vast space. Then, with deliberate casualness, 3 figures stepped out from behind a massive ore processor in the center of the chamber. Jiho, Minho, and Taiyang had transformed themselves into something that looked like it belonged in a military parade, rather than a mining facility. Their environmental suits had been completely rebuilt, using materials scavenged from around the facility. Metal plating from processing equipment had been shaped into armor. Fiber optic cables had been woven into communication networks. Power cells from mining tools had been connected to create personal energy shields that shimmered around them like heat distortions. But the most unsettling thing about them wasn't their improvised equipment. It was the way they moved. The 3 humans flowed across the chamber floor with perfect coordination, each one anticipating the other's actions without any visible communication. They spread out in a triangular formation that covered all angles of approach, their modified gear working together like parts of a single organism. Vexnol opened fire with everything he had. Plasma bolts filled the air like deadly lightning, each shot carrying enough energy to melt through starship hulls. Particle beams carved glowing lines through the chamber's atmosphere, seeking targets with computer-guided precision. For several seconds, the mining chamber became a hell of superheated gases and electromagnetic radiation that should have vaporized anything in its path. When the energy discharges finally faded and the air cleared, the 3 humans were still standing exactly where they had been before. Vexnol's weapons had been neutralized by targeted electromagnetic interference that seemed to come from the facility's own power grid. Every shot had been deflected or absorbed by equipment that had somehow been converted into defensive systems. His military-grade arsenal, designed to destroy fortified positions, had been rendered completely useless by what appeared to be repurposed mining machinery. Zixtha launched her psychic attack at the same moment, focusing all of her mental energy into a concentrated assault on the humans' minds. Her species had developed techniques for shutting down enemy nervous systems, creating overwhelming fear responses, and even stopping hearts through pure mental force. The psychic blast struck the humans and immediately rebounded back at her with double intensity. Somehow the equipment surrounding them had been jury-rigged into psychic dampening fields that not only blocked her attack, but reflected it back. At the source, Zixtha collapsed as her own mental assault hit her consciousness like a sledgehammer, leaving her convulsing on the chamber floor. The battle was over in less than 10 seconds. Vexenol found himself lying on the ground, his weapons scattered and useless around him, staring up at 3 humans who looked like they had just finished a routine maintenance check rather than a life-or-death combat encounter. Jiho knelt beside him, checking his injuries with the same casual efficiency he might use to inspect a piece of malfunctioning equipment. "Well, that was educational," the sergeant said conversationally. "Thanks for the demonstration of Zephyrian combat doctrine. We've been wondering how your species handles direct assault scenarios." As consciousness faded in and out, Vexenol finally understood what the veteran mercenaries had tried to tell him back on Station Omega-7. The humans hadn't just won the fight, they had turned it into a learning experience. Every weapon he had used against them, every tactic he had employed, every behavioral pattern he had displayed during the battle was being catalogued, analyzed, and prepared for transmission to other human military units. He hadn't just lost a contract. He had provided the human military with a complete tactical analysis of his species' combat capabilities, handed over on a silver platter through his own desperate attempt to salvage his mission. The worst part was realizing that this had probably been their plan all along. Jiho's hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped Vexenol struggle back to his feet. The young Zephyrian mercenary expected to feel the cold touch of execution weapons or the sharp bite of restraint devices, but instead found himself being treated more like a patient in a medical facility than a defeated enemy. Around the chamber, Minho and Taiyang were efficiently gathering up the other team members who had been captured during the 2-day engagement. Raxmore was carefully extracted from his maintenance pod prison, looking dazed but unharmed. The twins, Thax and Vax, were freed from their respective traps and helped to reunite with obvious relief. Even Quindar, his cybernetic system slowly coming back online, was treated with the same professional courtesy you might show to visiting dignitaries rather than hostile invaders. "You're probably wondering why you're all still breathing," Jiho said conversationally, his tone as casual as if he was discussing the weather rather than life-and-death combat operations. "The answer is actually pretty simple. Dead mercenaries can't spread the word about what happened here." With a gesture, the human sergeant activated a holographic display that materialized in the center of the mining chamber. The 3-dimensional projection showed a detailed timeline of the entire engagement, from the moment the mercenary ship had entered the star system to their final defeat just minutes ago. Every movement, every decision, every tactical choice had been recorded and analyzed in real time. Vexenol watched in growing horror as the display showed his team's approach from multiple angles. Their supposedly undetectable infiltration had been monitored by dozens of improvised sensors. Their encrypted communications had been decoded and recorded in full. Even their individual psychological profiles had been developed based on their behavior patterns during the engagement. "Every move you made is catalogued here," Jiho explained, pointing to different sections of the holographic timeline, along with corresponding countermeasures and tactical adaptations that we developed in response. "Your species' combat doctrine, your equipment capabilities, your decision-making processes under stress, it's all been documented and analyzed." Taiyang looked up from checking his modified equipment, which still bore scorch marks from the recent battle. "Your people have a saying that translates roughly to know your enemy. It's a good philosophy, time-tested across thousands of cultures. Humans have developed a slightly different approach, become better than your enemy. Every mercenary team that comes after you will face opponents who learned from your mistakes and adapted to counter your strengths. The implications of this hit Vexenol like a physical blow. It wasn't just that they had lost, it was that their defeat would make every future human encounter more dangerous for any mercenary foolish enough to accept similar contracts. They had essentially provided free training services to their own enemies. Minho gestured broadly to the modified mining equipment surrounding them, much of which still glowed with residual energy from their improvised defensive systems. We've been stationed on this facility for 6 months now. When we first arrived, this was just a simple mining operation. Basic industrial equipment, standard safety systems, routine resource extraction. Nothing special, nothing threatening, he pointed to various pieces of machinery that had been repurposed during the engagement. But now it's a comprehensive training ground. Every environmental system, every structural element, every piece of equipment has been catalogued and evaluated for potential tactical applications. Your attack taught us 17 new ways to use this facility's resources for defensive operations, that we hadn't considered before. The holographic display zoomed in to show specific examples, an ore scanner that had been converted into an electromagnetic warfare device, atmospheric processors that had been turned into chemical defense systems. Even the facility's waste management systems had been repurposed as part of an elaborate trap network. This is what you don't understand about humans, Jiho concluded, his voice carrying a weight of certainty that made the words feel like universal truth. We don't just fight to win individual battles. We fight to learn from every engagement. Every conflict makes us stronger, not just as individuals, but as an entire species. The sergeant gestured to his 2 companions, who had moved with such perfect coordination during the battle. Every technique you used against us, every weakness you exploited or tried to exploit, every psychological pressure you applied, all of that information is already being transmitted to other human military units throughout the galaxy. Taeyang nodded, his expression almost sympathetic. Your attack wasn't actually a threat to us, it was an education. A very expensive, very comprehensive course in multi-species combat operations, paid for by your employers and delivered by you. Personally, the truth settled over the captured mercenaries like a suffocating blanket. They hadn't just failed in their mission, they had actively contributed to making their own species more vulnerable to human military action in the future. Every secret technique, every tactical innovation, every piece of advanced technology they had brought to this engagement was now part of the human military's collective knowledge base. They had come to Kepler 442b as hunters, seeking to eliminate 3 isolated human soldiers. Instead, they had become unwilling teachers in humanity's ongoing education about galactic warfare, providing detailed lessons that would benefit human forces for generations to come. The most terrifying realization was that this had probably been the humans' plan from the very beginning. 3 weeks after the most humiliating defeat of his career, Vexenol stepped off a transport ship and back onto Station Omega-7. The young Zephyrian mercenary who had left with dreams of easy money and quick fame was gone, replaced by someone who carried himself with the quiet weight of hard-earned wisdom. His team followed behind him, each member bearing the same 1,000-yard stare that marked veterans who had seen something that fundamentally changed their understanding of the galaxy. The human Special Forces team on Kepler 442b had done something unprecedented in mercenary culture. They had released their captives completely unharmed, but not unchanged. Along with their freedom, each team member had received detailed tactical analysis of their own combat performance, complete with suggestions for improvement and recommendations for equipment upgrades. It was like receiving a performance review from the very people who had just defeated you in combat. Vexenol walked through the familiar corridors of the mercenary station with purpose, ignoring the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed in his wake. Word of his failed mission had already spread through the underground networks, but nobody knew the details yet. That was about to change. He made his way directly to the contract board, where that cursed human elimination mission still glowed, with its impossible payout still unclaimed after all this time. Around him, veteran mercenaries gathered to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to grim satisfaction. They had tried to warn him, and now they wanted to hear what he had learned from ignoring their advice. With steady hands, Vexenol connected his personal datapad to the public database and began uploading his complete mission report. The file was enormous, containing detailed tactical analysis, psychological profiles, and strategic recommendations that would normally be classified military intelligence. But this information was too important to keep secret. Every mercenary in the galaxy needed to understand what they would be facing if they ever considered accepting contracts against human forces. The response was immediate and overwhelming. As soon as the report became available, mercenaries throughout the station began accessing it, and their reactions created a chain reaction that spread across the galactic communication networks like wildfire. Within hours, the contract posting was flooded with warnings and additional tactical analysis, as other mercenaries began sharing their own experiences with human special forces. Each new entry painted a more complete and terrifying picture of what humanity represented in the context of galactic warfare. "They're not invincible," read one posting from a draconian war chief whose massive frame bore scars from a dozen different conflicts. "They're something much worse than invincible. They're evolving. Every single time we fight them, they become something completely new and different. The humans you face today are not the same species that fought yesterday, and tomorrow they'll be something else entirely." An ethereal psychic had contributed her own chilling analysis, attempted to probe human battle memories during a previous encounter. "Instead of the chaotic emotional impressions typical of most species during combat, I found entire tactical libraries dedicated to countering each known species' combat doctrines. They study us more thoroughly than we study ourselves, and they remember everything." But the most unsettling entry came from a former Nexus commander whose cybernetic implants had been upgraded with the latest tactical analysis software. "Humans don't win through superior technology or natural physical advantages. They win through adaptation. Every defeat they suffer teaches them something new. Every victory they achieve teaches them something different. Every species that fights them makes them stronger against all other species. They're not conquerors in the traditional sense. They're learners. And in a galaxy where everyone else relies on established patterns and ancient traditions, learners are the ultimate apex predators." The entries kept coming, each one adding another piece to a puzzle that revealed humanity's true nature as a galactic power. Stories of impossible victories, tactical innovations developed in real time during battle, and psychological warfare techniques that seemed to violate the basic laws of military science. Vexenol added his own warning at the bottom of the growing thread, his words carrying the weight of personal experience. "This contract remains unclaimed, not because the targets are impossible to kill, but because killing them would be completely meaningless. For every human unit you manage to eliminate, 10 more will learn from the battle data and become stronger because of it. We don't avoid these contracts out of fear for our own lives. We avoid them out of respect for an enemy that becomes more dangerous with every engagement, and out of responsibility to our own species' survival." As the reports accumulated, something unprecedented happened in mercenary culture. The human Special Forces contract began to fade from the board, its bright display dimming as the posting system automatically downgraded it based on the overwhelming negative feedback. Within days it disappeared entirely, never to be reposted by any employer foolish enough to think they could use mercenaries against human military forces. Word spread throughout the mercenary community faster than hyperspace communications could carry it. Humans weren't just another species to be fought and defeated through superior firepower or tactical advantages. They represented something entirely new in galactic civilization, a species that turned every conflict into an opportunity for growth, every enemy into an unwilling teacher, and every battle into a comprehensive educational experience. On countless worlds and space stations throughout the galaxy, alien mercenaries learned to recognize the warning signs. When a contract appeared, featuring Korean names like Jiho, Minho, Taeyang, Hyunwoo, or Seung, experienced fighters would shake their heads and walk away. Not because they couldn't win the fight, but because winning would only make the next human opponent that much more dangerous for whoever faced them afterward. The galaxy's mercenary community had finally understood humanity's greatest strength. It wasn't their technology, which was often inferior to other species. It wasn't their physical capabilities, which were average at best. It wasn't their courage or determination, which many other species possessed in equal measure. Humanity's true weapon was their ability to evolve through adversity, turning every defeat into valuable data and every victory into preparation for the next challenge. In a galaxy full of ancient species that had perfected warfare over millennia, humans had mastered something far more dangerous and infinitely more valuable. They had learned how to learn from war itself, making every battle a stepping stone toward becoming something greater than they were before.